Hello everyone, my name is HomieTrain, and today I'm going to make an in-depth tutorial about how to build a realistic city in Minecraft. Now, I'm not an expert, but I have learned a lot of helpful tips when building my city of Shamar. If you like this video, then I'd recommend checking out Alpine's video on how to plan a city. It's a great video, and he talks about some things that I don't cover. And with that out of the way, let's begin the tutorial. Before you start planning, the first thing I would do is pick a city in real life to base your city on. I would do a lot of research on a city, such as figuring out how it's laid out, what architectural styles there are, the type of climate, the culture, and overall just familiarize yourself with the city. I'll look around the city on Google Maps, watch videos about it, and if possible, visit the city in person. If you're picking multiple cities, I would make sure to pick ones that have similar environments and architecture, as ones that are different will clash with each other. Next, I would try to get an idea of how big you want to make your city. If you are building alone, I would avoid building a really large city, as it can be daunting and you could lose motivation pretty quickly. However, if you do want to build a large city, I would recommend building with a group. That way you have more people helping out and progress will go faster. Try to be minimalistic when planning your city. One thing that I try to do is to only build one or two specific areas found in cities. What I mean by this is only build, for instance, one industrial area, one wealthy neighborhood, one downtown area, and so on. I have it laid out like this in my city, where I try to avoid having duplicate types of areas. This way you can still have a city that feels vibrant with lots of different areas, but also not have to do as much work, and you don't have to build the same type of area over and over again. Another thing to think about is giving every area some sort of purpose, whether it's something like a stadium, museum, mall, culturally significant area, or even just an interesting looking area. People will visit more of your city if there are more interesting places to go to. Now that you have an idea of what you want to do, you need to plan out your city, and using a drawing app to plan out builds is a good way to do that. Personally, I like using Chrome Canvas, but something like Photoshop or even MS Paint can work. Planning like this helps keep track of progress, and you can plan out builds with more detail. When planning, try to think of how the city would have expanded over time. Think of where historical areas should be, and also think of the city's history from when it was founded to present day. When planning out future areas, you don't have to go into too much depth about them, but try to lay out where certain areas and builds will be, like the location of towns, public transit routes, environmental features, and other city amenities. And once you start building that area, you can make a more detailed plan. Don't be afraid to make major changes when planning in the future. I made a lot of major changes that I was conflicted about at first, but I think that my city has benefited a lot from them. Make sure to also set realistic goals. Don't set goals like building all of New York in a month, because that's near impossible and you will lose motivation really fast. Instead, set smaller, easier to achieve goals, like finishing a certain area of the city in 3 months. This way you can easily track your progress and feel more rewarded when you complete these goals. When you first start your city, I would recommend building from the city center outwards. This way your city will expand more naturally and it will resemble how the city would have expanded in real life. Start off with a few streets and buildings and go on from there. If you want to start building a different area of the city, I would be careful since there can be issues when you link these areas up in the future. This happened a couple times in my city when I decided to extend a couple train lines a few miles out from the city center. It was annoying since I had to constantly change or move it when I made changes to my future plans. When building anything in your city, I would always look at reference pictures and Google Maps. Even if it's something you've seen a lot before, like a fire hydrant or stoplight, I find that I always miss little details if I'm just going off of memory. If you're playing a Java edition, I would highly recommend using World Edit, as you can build much faster and also learn how to build better as well, since you can make major changes with less work. Some other mods that I also find helpful are command keybinds, sign edit, and multi-hotbar. Make sure to keep a consistent scale when building. I'll build a city at either a 1:1 scale, meaning that 1 meter in real life means 1 block in Minecraft, or build at a 1.5:1 scale, meaning that 1 meter in real life means 1.5 blocks in Minecraft. I usually prefer building at 1.5:1 scale, but you can pick whichever one you think would suit your city better. Also, make sure to make periodic backups of your city. This way, in case your save file is corrupted or you make a big change that you regret, you can revert your city back easily. When you start your city, you need to think about your road system. Building in a grid is the easiest way since you won't have to build diagonally, although if you think you can, I would also make some diagonal and curvy streets to give your city a bit of variety and make it look more complex. I'll be making a tutorial in the future going into more depth about how to make realistic roads. I would recommend making roads 3 to 5 blocks wide, but also know that not every road has to be the same width. Make sure to have wide sidewalks as well. I would recommend around 5 block wide sidewalks in urban areas like this. A very common issue I see with a lot of cities is that roads will sometimes make an immediate 90-degree turn. When making turns like this, try to have it gradually curve instead. You can use a website like this one to help make the curves. Another thing to think about is try to make a small curve at intersections for cars making right turns. Also, make sure to have realistic slopes when making roads. I would recommend making a minimum of a 1/6 slope. That means for every 6 blocks there is a 1 block rise. You can also use a mixture of slabs to help make a smoother slope. Make sure that your streets throughout the city aren't too repetitive. Try to make each one unique. You can do this by adding bus lanes, bike lanes, one-way streets, streetcars, wide streets, narrow streets, and car-free streets to give your city a bit of variety. Another good way to enhance a city is to have different sidewalk materials in different areas of downtown. For instance, I generally use clay as a default block, but in the capital area of my city, I use polished andesite to make it look like a more important area. Other blocks you can use include bricks, concrete, smooth stone, terracotta, stone bricks, and more. You can also combine multiple types of blocks to make some neat patterns, and you can do this with the streets as well. When building highways, there are a few things I would keep in mind. For one, I wouldn't recommend building one right through the center of a downtown area, as it can divide the area and make it less pedestrian friendly. Ways to fix this would be to either get rid of it altogether or have it go underground and build a park or additional buildings on top. Another thing to think about is making realistic interchanges. Like I explained earlier, try to make large and naturally curving on and off ramps for your highway. When making buildings, there are 2 ways I go about building them. The first way is to base a building on one in real life. To do this, I go on Google Maps and look around until I find a building that will look good in my city. When I build in Minecraft though, I don't copy it exactly. I change things about them such as the color, height, size, or shape to what suits the build I'm making. If you do decide to build a building from real life, never build iconic buildings like the One World Trade Center or the Burj Khalifa. Making buildings like this can make your city feel unoriginal and not very unique. The second way I make buildings is to make original ones. It can be harder to come up with an idea, but it can make your city feel more unique with your own buildings. No matter which one you choose, there are a lot of things you should keep in mind when making them, such as locations of entrances and exits, emergency exits, having both stairwells and elevators, a place to deposit garbage, a place where commercial deliveries can be made, bathrooms, roof access, and HVAC equipment. Building details like these can make a building look much more realistic and enhance the city. When making buildings, make sure to build a variety of buildings. For instance, avoid making a city that has only modern buildings, since it can make the city feel stale and lifeless if every building looks the same. Cities with a mix of architecture are a lot more interesting to look at and live in. I would also avoid having buildings the exact same height right next to each other. Having a variation of heights can make a city more interesting to look at. When making buildings, I would try to use a variety of blocks. For example, older buildings could use a mix of sandstone, endstone bricks, birchwood, regular bricks, different walls, trapdoors, fences, and doors. Using a variety of blocks can make a building look more interesting. Another thing to keep in mind is to build a gradual rise in buildings for the skyline. Don't go from single-family homes to skyscrapers in a block. Instead, go from single-family homes to townhomes and duplexes, to mid-rises, and then skyscrapers at the city center. Alpine made a great video about how to make a skyline if you want to check it out. Small details are one of the most important parts of building a city. Lots of small details can bring out a lot of life in a city, and one of the most important parts of detailing is to avoid uniformity. A big issue I see with a lot of cities in Minecraft is that they look too perfect. Some examples of what I mean are every city block being the exact same size, having the same streets and sidewalks throughout the city, and having the same stoplights and streetlights everywhere. These things can make a city look very uninteresting and boring to look at. Ways to fix this would be to have more variation in city block sizes, build some diagonal streets, change some of the road and sidewalk widths, and have different style stoplights and streetlights in different parts of the city. Another tip is to embrace imperfections. No city is perfect, and things like graffiti, abandoned buildings, exposed sides of buildings, and deteriorating infrastructure can give a city character. Make sure to add a lot of details on streets, such as benches, bus stops, advertisements, fire hydrants, plants, trees, streetlights, newspaper stands, mailboxes, and more. Adding lots of small details like this is a very good way of enhancing a street and giving it life. You You can also look around on Google Maps and find even more street details to add to your city. If you play on Java, you can use custom heads to add extra details to builds. The website Minecraft Heads has a wide variety of custom heads to choose from. Amenities are important when making a city. They provide services and recreation to people living in the city. Remember to build fire stations, police stations, water treatment plants, power plants, hospitals, post offices, libraries, beaches, parks, prisons, and stadiums. Another good detail is to add signs of growth throughout the city. What I mean by this is to add areas that used to have a structure of some sort but was demolished in the past, leaving behind remnants. For example, here you can see where this road used to extend over this train line and this river, and you can see the space where it would have gone. If you do add details like this, make sure that there is a reason for that structure to have existed in the past. Public transportation is very important when building a city. It helps to reduce traffic and provides alternative modes of transportation to get around. What transportation you add is really up to you. You can make buses, trams, ferries, light rail, subways, regional/commuter rail, and intercity rail. I would pick at least a couple of these to build, but if you're making a larger city, I would pick more. Airports are also important in cities. Unless you're building a large city, I would try to avoid building a massive airport. I would also learn about how airports are organized and learn what the markings on the runway mean. That way your airport will be realistic. Also, make sure to build airports far away from city centers and away from tall structures to reduce noise pollution and avoid collisions. And those are my tips for making a realistic Minecraft city. I hope you found them useful, and if you have your own tips or if there's something you disagree with, please leave a comment. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.